It's great to be back in Kansas City. Um, I obviously had a awesome experience here in Kansas City from 1994 until 2010, and my relationship with Kansas City actually began in 1984 when my mother moved here from Indianapolis. I was a senior in high school in Indianapolis, and I was a promising football player on a team that had a pretty good quarterback, a guy named Jeff George, and so we were going to, contend for a state championship. And so when my mother moved here, I stayed back because I had a chance to captain my football team, and we had an undefeated season, and I got a football scholarship to Ball State. But I connected with Kansas City in 1984 when my mother moved here, and so Kansas City is probably more of my hometown than even Indianapolis, where I grew up. My roots here run very deep. I was telling people I have an aunt that still lives here. My mom has moved back to Indianapolis, and it's funny, she comes here in 1984, and I come here in 1994, 3 months after she had moved back to Indianapolis. And so she had to move back to Indianapolis, take care of my grandmother, her mother, who was experiencing Alzheimer's, but just kept the Whitlock connection to Kansas City going. And as Dan Boland's here, and Dan, I recognize Dan, that's probably the first time I've probably seen Dan in maybe 20 years, but I recognized him instantly because Dan was one of the original people in the early years. Of you guys that have been here for a while or remember me from those days. I used to have a Christmas party. It started at my house, and then it got so big we started taking it to venues and ended up at 18th and Vine and all that. But Dan actually came to my house and got to experience my mother's home cooking, and it is awesome. Look at me. But I just have so many great memories, and the NCAA being here is part of my memory, and the NCAA moving to my real hometown, Indianapolis, I can remember being disappointed and devastated by that. But I'm a former college athlete. I've given college sports a lot of thought for a long time. And having played as a scholarship football player at a mid-major university, we used to sit around and complain in the 1980s, late 1980s, about, hey, how much time we were giving to Ball State football and what our compensation was for doing that. And we do the calculations. I remember as kids, we were all upset. We're getting a raw deal. We're putting in all these hours and we're not getting paid and blah, 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 blah. And that's how I thought as a young person. And then one day I had the good fortune of graduating from Ball State. And when I graduated from Ball State in May of 1990, unlike many of my friends at Ball State, I graduated with no debt, and they graduated with quite a bit of debt. And that was the first time a light bulb went off in my head that, like, hey, I'm starting my life out with a leg up on people that didn't play athletics and didn't have a scholarship. And that leg up allowed me to make a different set of decisions. I was a very average student at Ball State because I majored in football and socializing. And my last year, I took journalism very seriously, but I still was not qualified for a full-time job coming out of college. I worked for the student paper for 1 year. I just wasn't qualified for a full-time job. So I had to take a part-time job at the Bloomington Herald-Times in 1990 for $5 an hour. And there were two main reasons why I could do that. I had no debt, I had no kids, I didn't have a wife, and I had parents that, while not rich by any stretch, could provide me a little bit of support. But that experience was the first time I started realizing the true advantages I had of being a scholarship athlete. And being able to take that entry-level job for $5 an hour at the Bloomington Herald-Times was the first step towards building a life that I never thought was possible. I can remember being a student at Ball State and sitting in a class, and we had a professor that used to work at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the professor said that he made $70,000 a year when he worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I can remember sitting in that class going, oh my God, I'm gonna make $70,000 a year. Maybe when I'm 40, I'll make 75, and I'll just be writing about sports. What a life I will have. That was my dream. I just wanted to write about sports, felt like it wouldn't be work, and my God, if I could make $75,000 a year, that would be incredible. I exceeded all of that by great leaps and bounds by the time I was, I took the job here in 1994, and they paid me $65,000 a year in 1994, and I had so much success in 1995, they jumped my salary to $150,000 a year. And other opportunities, the ESPNs, the Fox Sports, the opportunity to do sports radio here in Kansas City. And the success just started piling on top of each other until the next thing you know, by 2010, I'm living on the Wilshire corridor that connects Brentwood, Beverly Hills, and Westwood in a high rise. I'm in one of the highest zip codes in America. And I'm sitting there thinking, and because if you go back to 1984 when my mother moved here, I moved in with my dad, and at that point, my dad was in trouble with the IRS. They had shut his business down. Me and my dad lived in a 400 square foot, one bedroom apartment in the ghetto my senior year of high school. I slept on a couch. And I would wake up in 2010, like, how did I get here? How do you go from that kind of poverty to this type of excess? And it really all began with Ball State University giving me a football scholarship, a guy that, if not for football, weren't many schools looking for me to come on campus. And having my education paid for and having my eyes open and having all those new experiences put me on a path to live out my version of the American dream. And so when I say I've given all of this a lot of thought, I really have given all of this a lot of thought. And I'm not a fan of name, image, and likeness. College athletics have reached a point 20 years ago, 25 years ago, where the athletes needed to be compensated in some way. There's just too much money. You can't have a coach making $3 and $4 million a year and athletic directors making $750,000, $1 million a year. You can't have everybody benefiting financially. Television networks pouring all this money and the schedule's exploding. When I played college football, you played 11 games. Now these teams play 14 and 15 games if they make it all the way through the playoffs. Their travel schedules, they're playing, Ball State plays midweek games now, later in the year on Wednesdays and Thursdays. They're traveling all over the country. These conferences have expanded. They've compromised the educational experience to meet the television demands. And that to meet the television demands to get the money, and they're just pouring more and more money. And so I did reach the conclusion that, hey, these guys need to be compensated. And I would read up about Walter Byers, the architect of the NCAA, conservative white guy from Kansas, ran the NCAA, built it, constructed it, the whole nine. And he wrote a book in his memoir. And he said, this is in the 1990s at some point, he said that the college system was a form of plantation slavery, that the administrators and coaches were profiting and they're sending the kids out And yes, they get an education, but they need to benefit as well. This is Walter Byers. Again, I'm a white conservative from Kansas, and he's making perfect sense, but he could not compel the NCAA to take action. And so through the NCAA's inaction, people like Sonny Vaccaro, who used to be a friend of mine, I have no problem with Sonny, I just haven't talked to him for years, but Sonny, a very smart guy that partnered with Ed O'Bannon, and they started suing the NCAA about name, image, and likeness because the NCAA, derelict in their duty, just hoping things would just get better and go away, would never take action on figuring out a way to compensate the athletes with all this money pouring into college athletics. And so this lawsuit created name, image, and likeness. And now college sports are the wild, wild west. No one put this together. They were forced to do the name, image, and likeness by the courts and by this lawsuit. There's no vision, there's no plan. And so it's now, again, the wild, wild west. And I think it's going to have a corrosive impact on college sports. And I think we're already seeing examples of this. I'll take the Angel Reese, the LSU basketball player that won the national championship with LSU. But her fame is coming from taunting the Iowa basketball player after winning the championship. And through that fame, through that infamy of no sportsmanship and taunting an opponent, she's now, I think, they say she's going to make $3 million next year for getting in the girl's face and pointing to her ring finger and following around the court. And we're going to see more and more of that. The kids have figured out if they can build a brand, no matter what type of brand it is, if they can get involved in controversy, if they can do some me stuff, corporations are going to respond. We're all addicted, the television networks and everything, whatever anybody will click on, whatever will drive conversation. And so I said this at the outset, that the kids, being little business people, are going to start acting out and abandoning any type of sportsmanship and doing things that have nothing to do with winning or losing to make themselves a bigger brand so that they can profit more. I just saw last week where, Angel Reese got herself a Mercedes, and again, she's on track to make $3 million. And then I look across at what's going on in college football and basketball, but you can really see it in college football with the transfer portal and how name, image, and likeness has corroded the minds of all coaches. And you can see it. The guy that has stepped out at this point to really hammer this home is Deion Sanders at Colorado. Deion, like all coaches, now he's just wearing it on his sleeve, but all coaches are now thinking this way. I don't have a student athlete to develop. I have a young business person on my football or basketball team who will leave this school at the drop of a dime if another school offers a better NIL deal. And so Deion has taken a very business mentality. You want to leave? Leave. And 50 some odd Colorado football players have left. And he's making analogies in interviews. Hey, I got to get new furniture in here. I got this brand new house in Colorado, and I got to get new furniture in here, and the old furniture's got to go. He's saying it, but trust me, everybody is believing it. You have young people that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of them millions of dollars. They're just little businessmen on your football team. And you guys know business very well. It's very cold and calculated, and it's very bottom line driven. And that's going to be more, and people will sit there and say, well, the coaches have always had that mentality. That's not completely true. They've had some of that mentality, but they've all, particularly during my era, all of them, even the bad ones, were trying to serve a bigger purpose. It wasn't just cold, hard facts. And I'll give you an example. The same way that I was as a columnist, a very outspoken locker room lawyer, that's how I was as a college football player. My head coach did not like me because I was impossible to control. I said what I thought. If I thought the coaches did something wrong and stupid, I'd call them out on it. Coaches didn't like me. My 5th year, I chose not to return to the football team because I had a torn ACL. Me and the coaches didn't get along that well. I had never really focused on academics in my career, so I didn't want to play my 5th year. The coach didn't like me, but kept me on scholarship my 5th year. He had every right, if he wanted to play hardball and say, "You don't want to play football? Fine, Whitlock." Because I was a starter and a very good player for him the year before. Could have easily dusted me. But he had a higher calling. He wanted me to graduate. He figured that, I'd grow up at some point. And so he let me finish out. And I'm sure there was some reward for guys that he got in his contract, more guys that graduated. It was probably good for him as well. But there wasn't this cold, calculated business aspect to football. Now, with name, image, and likeness, and all the players being so driven by money, people like Deion Sanders and other coaches, okay, we're in the business world now. You don't like it here? Deuces, I'll replace you with someone else. College athletics is going to become more and more coarse because of name, image, and likeness. I felt like, and I argued, and I used to write these pieces all the time, there was a far better solution. An acknowledgement that this is a business and more money is being poured into it, and there are some of the most talented athletes that we need to figure out a way to compensate beyond their scholarship. A guy like Jason Whitlock that was not going to play in the NFL, education, no debt, bunch of other little perks, tutors at my beck and call. Though that was fine compensation for me. But a lot of the elite players that drive television ratings, I felt like deserved some compensation. And what the NCAA should have started doing 30 years ago is working with the NFL and NBA that, hey guys, we got a partner. We're the farm league for your leagues. Let's partner up and let's figure out a way that will take the top 300 basketball players, 18 to 22, and we'll provide them in summer internships with the NBA. And we will compensate them for participating in those internships. We'll put on some kind of summer basketball league where they play 10 games. We'll televise it. The best players all come to Las Vegas or some city, and we put on some kind of summer deal for 3 or 4 weeks. These guys make 100, 250, maybe the seniors make $1 million. Once TV gets involved and they start telling you can pay people real money. Take the top 300, take the top 500 or so football players. Let them do internships in the NFL. Let the NFL guys, you got 32 teams, you send 15 guys to each team to spend the summer with those teams, learn about the business, learn about the history of the league. You compensate these guys for their internships and being able to develop and further scout and know who you're getting involved with. You do that type of partnership, and then you tie the money that you're giving them for these internships, you tie that money to their academic performance while in school. A guy with a higher GPA, I would be monitoring the class attendance of everybody. Guy with a higher percentage of class attendance gets compensated and paid even more. And then you set aside some of this money that it comes in a balloon package upon graduation. So you're compensating the guys while incentivizing them to be better students, better people, better citizens, not just, hey, you taunted someone, everybody's talking about you, let's get you a Mercedes deal. Hey, the direction we're headed is just going to, and again, I'm not here in Kansas City anymore. I haven't been here since 2010. I've asked people this about Kansas, the Kansas basketball program. and because that was the most unique college experience while I was here. Kansas basketball, and probably K-State football is a unique experience, a lot of passion or whatever. But I've just asked, is it the same? Is the feeling among the fans and the relationship with the players, is it the same as when Jacques Vaughn and Rafe LaFrentz and Paul Pierce and those guys that all stayed 3 and 4 years? Is it the same feeling, or is it different? And most people say it is slightly different. They still enjoy it, but it is slightly different. The relationship between the fans and the players, the connection the players make with the universities, it's not the same. College sports is about tradition, and it's about kids at a special time in their life making a connection with other kids and with the university. I think we're going to see a lot of that go away as Ball State this year. We're going to play a quarterback. Is going to be our starting quarterback. I think this is his 5th college team that he will have quarterbacked. He's a decent player. He's been a starter at 4 different colleges, and Ball State will be his 5th. And the LSU women's team that just won an national, that's all a transfer team. They don't have strong connections to LSU. The Angel Reese played at Maryland the year before. Deion's building a transfer team. They're all building transfer teams. It's all just going to be a bunch of mercenaries traveling the country. It'll feel like AAU basketball and AAU football or 7-on-7 football in about 5 years. It'll be a process, but that's where we're headed. That's why I don't like name, image, and likeness. That's why I wish the NCAA had some foresight and some vision and some boldness to take preventative, visionary steps that could have rewarded the players for being good students and athletes and better citizens. There was a way to do this the right way. We've done it the wrong way. That's my speech.